Crying could make you feel better. It is something your mother told you when you were a kid, and it is something science now confirms. Crying relieves stress and could even help you live longer. But what about in the workplace? How often do people cry at work? And is it good or bad for you if they do? In this episode of When Logic Fails, we are going to talk about crying at work. I am your host. Every day, more than 4 million people around the world tune into our show. If you're new here, subscribe and join our community. You are listening to When Logic Fails, a show about the emotional side of intelligence. A recent survey of almost 2,000 full-time employees found that on average, workers cry at their job about once every 7 months. More than half of those surveyed reported having cried at work in the last year. On average, they cried for about 9 days. Nearly 1/3 said they cried more than 10 days in a row. Around 1 in 10 had shed tears at work in the last month. Among women, that figure was closer to 1 in 4. These findings are consistent with data from previous years. In the US, the average employee cries at work somewhere between 8 to 11 days per year. In the UK, that number comes to 6 to 9 days a year. The most common reasons given by workers for crying at work were personal problems followed by stress related to work itself. Being treated unfairly at work, arguments with colleagues and bosses, grief and burnout were also mentioned. 1 in 10 said they cried after experiencing a traumatic event at work. We cry for all sorts of reasons. When we are sad, when we are happy, when we are angry, when we are afraid or stressed out, even when we are bored. Crying is thought to be an instinctive reaction to strong emotions, something we have in common with other mammals. Crying can reduce tension and anxiety and has been associated with improved health outcomes. Babies who are allowed to cry and then breastfeed experience improved stress recovery. Crying could also lower blood pressure and increase relaxation. Some studies have suggested that frequent crying may be associated with increased longevity, although other research has failed to replicate these results. Still, there is general agreement among experts that crying is good for us. But what if you cry at work? You know, that place that's supposed to be all about professionalism and keeping your emotions in check. How does crying at work affect you and your career? Well, the first thing to note is that everyone cries. Crying is not a sign of weakness, of low intelligence or lack of self-control. Even if you don't remember crying as a child, that doesn't mean you never did. Crying is a natural response to any strong emotion. No one should feel ashamed of crying. So if you cry at work, there is nothing wrong with you. The next important thing to note is that most people don't cry at work. I am saying this because if you cry, often, you may think everyone else does too, and that isn't the case. Most people manage their emotions well enough to keep their tears to themselves. This means that if you do cry at work, you are in the minority. And statistically speaking, being in the minority is already a reason to pay attention. People don't usually cry at work, so if you do, chances are you are experiencing something worth paying attention to. I would like to share 3 situations where crying at work might actually be a good thing. First, when someone you work with dies. In the wake of such a tragedy, you might need to cry. Don't hold it back. Instead, let yourself feel the emotion and cry. If you are close to the person who died, you might also want to take a few days off to grieve. That is normal and understandable. Of course, if you have a very understanding boss, you might be able to use those days as paid time off. But even if you don't, you shouldn't mind. Losing someone dear is painful, and sometimes no amount of money can compensate for that. If you need to cry, then cry. Take some time off if you need it. In the long run, it will make you feel better. Second, if you are underpaid, underappreciated and overworked, maybe it's time you cried. Now, please hear me carefully. I am not suggesting you go to your boss and cry to get a raise. That won't work. I am saying that if you find yourself constantly doing more than you should, if you notice you are not getting the credit you deserve, or if you realize you are making less than others for doing the same job, then you should cry. Cry because it's the only way to let out all the frustration, anger and sadness that comes from being taken advantage of. Cry because you need to free yourself from all that burden. And then after you cry, take action. Give your 2 weeks notice and look for a new job. Stay clear of toxic environments and people who exploit you. If you cry, you will feel relieved, and then you can focus on building a better future for yourself. Finally, third, if you just got laid off, you should probably cry. Losing your job is tough. There is no sugarcoating it. No matter how you try to look at it, losing your job sucks. You might have worked hard for decades to climb the corporate ladder only to find yourself suddenly unemployed. It's easy to feel devastated, scared and unsure of the future. So if you find yourself in this situation, let yourself cry. Let yourself feel the emotion of what's happening. Allow yourself to process the news and adjust to the idea of not going to work anymore. We tend to think that crying is a sign of weakness, but crying could be a sign of strength. Strength to accept the reality of the situation. Strength to feel the pain and process the emotions that come with it, and strength to accept that things will get better. Of course, there are situations where crying at work is less appropriate. If you are so overwhelmed with your work you start crying every single day, then you need to seek help. Burnout is a serious issue and it requires treatment. Crying at work can be an indicator that something's wrong, so pay attention to your body and mind. If you notice yourself crying every day, it's time to take a break and address the root causes of your distress. Burnout doesn't come out of nowhere. It's always preceded by small warning signs that, if addressed early, could prevent it from happening. Crying every day at work is one such sign. Don't ignore it. Another inappropriate time to cry at work is when you are trying to negotiate a raise with your boss. Crying during a salary negotiation is counterproductive. Studies show that people who cry during negotiations are perceived as less competent and less committed to the organization and end up getting paid less. Emotional displays during negotiations don't pay off. If you want to get a raise, be assertive and confident, not sad and desperate. Now, let's answer the question I am sure many of you are dying to ask. What if someone else cries at work? Should you comfort them? Should you report them? Or should you simply stay clear? Well, it depends. If you walk in on your colleagues sobbing uncontrollably, it's best to leave them alone. Crying could be a private matter, so respect their privacy. Unless you are their supervisor and it's affecting their performance at work, it's none of your business why they are crying. If you really want to help, wait until they calm down and then ask if everything is okay. Only if they say no and ask for help should you step in. Be respectful, be discreet, and don't gossip. After all, no one likes to talk about their problems over the water cooler. If the situation calls for it, say you are available if they need to talk or require assistance, but don't push it. It's not your job to fix their problems. On the other hand, if your colleague is constantly crying, then you should talk to them. They might be going through something difficult and could use a friend. And if their problems are work-related, they might appreciate your help. Crying at work can be a sign of stress, burnout, depression, or other serious issues. It's important to be aware of the warning signs and know how to respond appropriately. So when you see someone crying at work, first assess the situation. Are they in distress or is it a private matter? If it's a private matter, respect their privacy and avoid prying. If they are in distress, offer your support and help. Remember, sometimes all someone needs is a listening ear and a shoulder to cry on. Crying at work is something to be mindful of, both for ourselves and for our colleagues. By being aware of the potential causes and consequences of crying at work, we can better support ourselves and those around us. It is important to remember that crying is a natural human response to a wide range of emotions and experiences, and by understanding this, we can create a more compassionate and supportive work environment. For everyone, have you ever cried at work? What was the reason? Do you think it helped or did it make things worse? Share your thoughts with us in the comments below. Also, let us know if you enjoyed this episode and tell us what you would like to learn about next. Don't forget to subscribe and press the bell icon. Thank you for watching. Until next time.